back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ken Swartz. First, just a couple of announcements. Great way to help support Forbidden Knowledge News. Watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, available on Tubi and multiple streaming platforms. You can also get a Rokfin premium membership at rokfin.com/FKN+. And always be sure to download our episodes directly through Spreaker, our podcast provider. Today I want to welcome back to the show Ken Swartz. He is founder and chief science officer of C60 PurplePower. He has run several research science laboratories over the course of his career and discovered C60 while developing the Moxy fusion reactor. During his research, he became aware of the powerful free radical neutralizing properties of C60, and in 2016 he founded C60 PurplePower. Ken, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing great, and it's great to be back on.
It's great to have you back on. Love our discussions, and we may go in a few different directions today, but one of the things you sent me was about Stanley Meyer. For those that may not be familiar, Stanley developed a method of converting water into fuel and was most likely killed for the discovery. Now, we're going to learn more about that and the incredible work that you are doing that ties in with Moxy fusion. And we've discussed a little bit about that before on previous shows. And today is also the anniversary of the destruction of the Twin Towers, a pivotal step in the global domination process. We may get into a little bit of the current dystopia that we're experiencing as well if we have time. So before we get into any of that, Ken, it's been a little while. Just remind the audience a little bit about yourself and your work.
Oh yeah, I'm a research scientist, and probably some of you heard me talk about Moxy fusion, metal oxygen fusion. That's kind of the main thing that I talk about, with a few others, and then also kind of that's part of that carbon 60 stuff. And for those who remember, that's I learned about carbon 60 while protecting my crew and myself from radiation on the Moxy fusion reactor project, because there was a lot of late doctors and dead professors associated with this kind of research, just basically. And so I didn't want to end up in that batch. So what I did is I went out looking for radiation protection, and I found this stuff called carbon 60, C60 for short. And, they gave one set of rats got C60, the other set didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The C60 rats lived, whereas the controls, of course, died. It was a fatal dose. And when I learned about that, I got a couple sources for myself and my crew, because, they had families and I'm responsible for them. And, by the way, we're all still around. So it worked as a radiation protection. But I kept taking it because I had more energy, better mental focus. The afternoon blahs you get after you eat lunch, they kind of went away. And but what I got is 7 months after I started taking it, I went to see my optometrist, in my DRUES, or dry macular degeneration, which I'd had for years and was slowly progressing, had completely disappeared. And my optometrist had never seen that happen before in his many decades of practice. And he was a really old guy. He's still around too, but he's just going to go to the end. And then in the meantime, my electrical engineer in the product, Gary Rodriguez, he had type 2 diabetes. And from that, he had developed severe wet macular degeneration. It was so bad, he was going to have to quit his job as an engineer because, his eyes were going. So I made a C60 thing in MCT oil, which is medium chain triglycerides, which can be turned into ketones by your liver. And so it's kind of flex fuel for your cells. So if your cells can't burn glucose, they can certainly they can burn the ketones. And by the way, disclaimer here, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot give medical advice, and I'm just doing anecdotal experiences of myself and people that I know. And so he took a little bit, I took a tablespoon a day for about 15 months, and his severe wet macular degeneration completely disappeared. It's gone today. His type 2 diabetes went subclinical. And that kind of started my whole C60 journey. And so I started making it for family, friends, and myself, because going blind really sucks. So since I found something that prevents that from happening, I'm not going to let that go. So then I shared it with healthcare professionals that I knew, and they had great results. And then they shared it with their patients and had great results, until one day Cliff High mentioned it on Sarah Westall's show. and the whole thing blew up, and that actually blew up the whole C60 market. And now it's I guess now it's an
Mm.
industry. There was just a couple of us doing it at that time, and now there's just gobs of people selling C60
Well,
products.
C60 Purple
And I
Power, I have
should
to say, is the highest quality product that I've experienced. We've been affiliates for a very long time of C60 Purple Power. The benefits for me have been personally amazing and incredible, and I talk about it all the time on this show. And we are still offering 10% off any order from C60. And tell us a little bit more about some of what C60 Purple Power offers besides just the oils.
Oh well, actually the chain name got changed a little bit. It's called C60 Power.
C60
We
Power.
wanted to mainstream it, but if you go C60 Purple Power, the links are all there. Some other things, of course, we have the gummies.
Yes, those are amazing.
We're the only C60 gummies, and that's really because some people like oils, some people don't. But the gummies, they really taste good. The only problem is you can eat too many. So it's C60 doesn't have any toxicity at any level, but if you eat too many of them, it can get you going a little too much. Oh, and for the ladies out there, and maybe for some of the guys, Jess, our CEO, she had some really her very very best facial products that she had. We kind of took it to a formulator in Florida, and we kind of back engineered them. And so now we have a C60 anti-gravity serum. It's for your face, and it has all the wonderful good things in it that women love that make their face look better. And I could go on and read the list, but it's long. It's long. It has all those good things, and I'm a guy, so but they have been making me do it, so I guess my face is looking good. So because as a person, I got to do that. And then they also have a youth renewal eye cream,
Mm.
and it's you put it under your eyes if you got bags, don't sleep as much, and wrinkles, and it's got the copper peptides. They have these special copper peptides that really help in rejuvenating the thin skin under your eyeballs and on your eyelids there, I guess, not on your eyeballs. It's under your
Eh,
eyelids. In fact the very first human study of C60 was they made a cream for Japanese women, and it applied topically to the faces of Japanese women. It reduced lines and wrinkles. Although some women say Japanese women don't get lines and wrinkles. Well, the wrinkles that they do get, the C60 takes it away.
right on.
So that's kind of the fun stuff. And yeah, and we also have C60 skin. We're going to have one for hair growth, because that's another scientific study. It found that it regrew hair, and so there are some ones out there with hair growth. They always came in two parts, and when you get one, it'll make you a wet head. So we're going to have a great one when that comes up, and I'll be one of its customers.
And
Right
one
off
of my
the bat,
favorite things
I have a
is it can
history.
also be used by your pets. We have a family dog
Oh,
here. Actually, my roommate's dog was not doing so well. It was having some areas of patchy hair, hair loss, less energy, and started to sprinkle a little bit of C60 on her food. And within a couple of months, hair grew back, and she's like a brand new dog. Can't contribute that to C60, but the same timing was there. So I'll just say that.
uh, yeah, it's the same thing with people. If you're old dog, it's really. I mean, if you're looking out there, if you're in your 20s and 30s, I know how it is. You're going to live forever. But when you start getting in your 40s and 50s and the gray hair comes on, that's when you really start appreciating C60, because it gives you that boost, right? You don't even need coffee if you take C60 in the morning. It just gets you going and runs, and that's the good thing, because it's a whole thing about health span. That's what it's about. It's not just about lifespan, because what good is being old if you're just decrepit in a in a wheelchair? But the C60, we were talking about that. I was just at a conference here last weekend, and I gave a talk on C60 and health span, and some of the amazing things. They had one where they had these mice that basically they gave it to mice, these wild type mice, that it increased their lifespan 11%, but actually it preserved their cognitive abilities all the way up till the end. It actually improved them. So they lived extra long, and their brains were with them, because that's what's important. Because if you're drooling in a wheelchair, you won't even know you're
Right.
old. So what good is that? So C60 preserves the brain, and basically any part of your body that has a lot of mitochondria in it. So like your brain cells are like half mitochondria. right? That's the energy powerhouse that runs your cells. So they do great. Any of the endocrine system, and of course muscles, especially the heart. So and it's even that thing they call for long COVID. People tell us, "Oh wow, this is so amazing. It's the only thing that works." But anyway, I didn't get the jab, so I can't talk
Right.
about
And
that.
one of the other things that C60 has been at least noticeable for me and my family is the assistance with inflammation, and this is a big thing with quality of
Oh yeah.
life as well as we get older.
Oh yeah, that's inflammation is just it's just everywhere. I mean, look at all the food they got. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can try to eat right, you can try to do that, but they got, they go somewhere and there's something nasty in the food. I mean, you should be avoiding seed oils and the high fructose corn syrup. And you heard it a dozen times from people. But no matter how good you are, some of that slips in if you're just living your regular life. So C60 helps that helps cover some of those sins of commission and maybe even a few sins of omission. But
Yeah.
it's fun, and it's really nice kind of having the company. I'm just the research scientist now. I've hired people that are way better at doing CEO and all that other stuff than I am, and but it's fun, and you get love letters or love emails every day on people and how it's so improved their life. And I really we have a channel, C60 PurplePower channel on YouTube, and if you want to go there and look at it, I mean they have like all kinds of different health conditions. And we have a lot of doctors. We just have hundreds of doctors that use our product with their patients because, if it restores mitochondria function, that's what it really works well at. There's an antioxidant called superoxide dismutase in your mitochondria, and it works with catalase to get rid of superoxide, the most damaging oxidative radical in the body. And C60 is the only thing that's an SOD catalase mimic. It passes the gut barrier, the brain barrier, into your mitochondria, into the cells, into the mitochondria, where it restores mitochondria function. Because if your mitochondria is working well, then your cells are working well, then the treatment that the health professionals give you works better. That's why we have so many hundreds of doctors using our product. But I think that's probably enough for C60.
Yeah.
That's,
And once again, to find out more, click the link right in the description, bring you to their website. And by using that link, you're going to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. So that's a good introduction to C60. Let's get into the story of Stanley Meyer. Tell us a little bit more about this, especially for those that may not be familiar with this story.
Yeah, well, if you type Stanley Meyer and water car on YouTube or Rumble or anything, you're just going to get hundreds of videos. And so Stanley Meyer was this kind of eccentric inventor. And what most people don't know, he actually had a twin brother. I think it's a fraternal twin who was an electrical engineer. And he was the kind of the guy behind the scenes. And so both of them were working together. And he had this, he took a dune buggy. It had a flathead VW engine in it, that kind of dune buggy. And he actually could, at times, he would just demonstrate it in front of scientists, right? So they had a whole bunch of scientists there, and he would run it, and he would run it, and it would basically run off water. It's kind of like the HHO thing, where you bust water into hydrogen and oxygen. But he actually had a system where he used fuel injectors, and we'll probably get into why that was so, rather than like the bubbling gas thing that most people think of when you do HHO. And he would have it there, and there'd be just a small battery that ran the dune buggy, and the scientists. And there was also a big gas cylinder, which put a neutral gas in there, and we'll talk more about that. And so he would run that dune buggy, and they had scientists there, and they would see that it was over unity, and so it would been confirmed by a whole lot of different scientists had been there, and they watched it, and they were everywhere. They looked at it, they saw it, but and so that he was promoting it, and he was going to do that. But then one day, he was in, I think, I don't know what he was, late 60s, early 70s, whatever it was. He was going to a meeting some people allegedly from some NATO organization, right? Foreigners from NATO organization from Europe, and he met them in a Cracker Barrel for I guess lunch, and discuss them doing something with his technology, trying to sell his technology. And during the meal, he just stood up, and I think his brother was there, or maybe some other supporter was there. And Stanley stood up and said, "I've been poisoned." And he ran out into the parking lot and he died. And that was kind of they killed him. And of course, the two guys, the NATO guys, disappeared pretty damn quick. So nobody knows really who those people were. And and then there was the whole mystery of why did they kill Stanley Meyer? And there's actually a whole group of people out there that have been trying to redo Stanley Meyer's work. Now it goes on there. I sent you a link, and it's a link from that Jeff Rentz set up for me. But there's a little bit more to this story, and it comes. This is like years later. It comes with Dr. Stephen Greer. And most of you may remember him as he's kind of the UFO guy. He's also about the new technologies and all that.
Yeah.
And so I guess Stanley Meyer's the Stanley Meyer family decided they were going to sell Stanley stuff, right? And so Stephen Greer got a group together, and they were going to buy Stanley Meyer stuff, and they were going to do like an open source and live streaming of Stanley Meyer technology, because he just didn't have the water call. He also had this toroid energy generator too. So there was a variety of different things that the Meyers had been working on. So he wanted to buy that and do like this open source thing, because you've heard all the stories of the free energy stuff that's been suppressed, right? And I guess Stanley Meyer is one of the classic stories of that. He ended up dead in a park.
I want to talk about that for a second. You said that he came running out of the restaurant saying that they killed me, so he must have realized that he had been poisoned by whoever he was with at the time?
Yeah, he stood up and he said, "I've been poisoned." And then he got out of, I don't know if he ran out, but he stumbled out of the restaurant somehow and trying to get away, and he died in the parking lot. So
did you find out who he was having a meeting with that day?
Well, according to the thing, there were a couple of representatives from NATO organization.
Interesting.
Nobody ever got the names, and like they disappeared after that happened. Like they kind of got, well, anyway, they were gone. So nobody ever really, I mean, you can go on and there's dozens of people who've investigated it. I'm just giving you the briefest overview, and I would encourage you to go look online, and there's long stories. But the story continues. So it's not just these guys, but Stephen Greer tried that, but Stephen Greer did not succeed. Actually, a group of people from Britain bought all of Stanley's stuff, and they somewhere in the Midwest, they moved it to a scientific laboratory in the Midwest. And of course, they were out there to make a bunch of money on it, right? And then what happens is, because Stephen Greer wanted to open source it, but these guys were all super secret, and so this was a couple of years later, and Stephen Greer gets a call from one of the guys that had financed and supported, the buying of that technology, and the guy was up to crying and said that that one of the engineers had called him, and the guy was on the run, and he said that all the other researchers who've been working on the project had been killed, and he was the only one still alive. And he called this guy like on the run, telling him what was going on, and then the other guy never heard from him again. And really that's where the story ends. I don't really. Stephen Greer talks about it. That's why one of the links you could have Stephen Greer talk about it. But and then I guess the stuff just disappeared. Nobody knows. There's really no information on what happened to Stanley Meyer's car, what happened to all the other stuff. It's just, the guys, evidently the scientists were killed, at least according to Stephen Greer's contacts, and then the stuff just disappeared. And so we don't really know. It just vanished. And allegedly it's been taken, and nobody knows where Stanley Meyer stuff.
Well, looking back at this story, do you think that there could have been anything done to protect Stanley in any way, that he could have preemptively shared information with someone that might have been a smarter way to do this?
Well, he probably should have done the Stephen Greer method, which is what I do with Moxy Fusion. And this is where my part of the Stanley Meyer story gets up. And I've been talking about Moxy Fusion. If you go out online, look Ken Swartz, Moxy Fusion, you'll probably see a dozen videos out there. And so one day I'd been giving a talk about, Moxy Fusion. And the main thing for those out there, like what it was is Moxy Fusion, give me a short synopsis on that. There was a couple of guys, Osawa and Kushi. These were a couple of Japanese guys in the late 50s, early 60s. And what they did is they created basically this chamber. It was running off a sodium street lamp power supply. And it was basically, they made this special sodium street lamp light where they had sodium in it, but they also had an equal amount of oxygen. And it was all pressurized with argon, which is the key, the moderator there. And they turned it on, and this is a documented test. They turned it on, and you could see through. It was like a solid cylinder, ceramic cylinder with a little tiny quartz window, all wrapped in steel, so it wouldn't blow up because it gets pretty hot. And they could see through the little quartz window the typical, that orange yellow glow of the sodium street lamp, right? Which you're familiar with. And then after several hours, it turned purple. And what happens is the purple is the color of what happens when potassium. It's like when potassium. So it's from a sodium street lamp to a potassium street lamp. And if you take sodium and you fuse it with oxygen, it makes potassium. And Osawa and Kushi had this yin-yang thing where one side of the atomic chart was yin and the other side was yang. And we call that in the West electronegativity. And then the two could fuse together to make new elements. And they actually proved it. And but their technology kind of was a threat to existing industry, and they kind of got suppressed. They continued their research and stuff, but it never really went anywhere because Japan was an occupied country, and so I'm just to kind of go now. What I did is I was in the right time with the right place with the right people, and we were going to redo Osawa and Kushi's experiments, but instead of using sodium. In the same atomic family as sodium is hydrogen, and an isotope of hydrogen is deuterium. And so if I was to fuse deuterium with oxygen, it would give like the maximum energy yield. And for those of you listening, well, I'll talk about that. But for those of the watching, I kind of have, that's right, that doesn't work.
I can see it a little bit when it's in front of you.
Let me adjust the screen here so I can, so you can see that. There we go. Hopefully this is working now.
Now, if there's anyone listening on the audio end, if you'd like to see the visuals here, go watch on Rumble or Rokfin.
Yeah, so basically what I'm showing here is what they did. They did sodium with oxygen to make potassium. What we did is we put deuterium with, sorry about the lights there, with oxygen, 16, and it made fluoride 18, which then electron decays into oxygen 18. And releases a little bit of energy. In fact, and that's actually some of the important things there. And if anybody interested in listening or they're watching, if you just type in on your search engine, Moxy Fusion, MOXY Fusion ResearchGate, you can pull up my paper and read it for yourself. And then we posted it. We did like the Stephen Greer thing. We're not going to make it all secret and stuff. So we confirmed that the Osawa-Kushi fusion process was correct. And so we've had our paper posted up there since 2014. And also later, another group, a group called the Scotia Group, working with the University of Valencia, also on ResearchGate, published it. So if you can type this up on ResearchGate and look at it too. And the title is Experiments Demonstrating the Creation of Elements via Pulsed Electric Field in Water and Deuterated Water, Applications to the Production of Fluoride. And and actually what they did, we had a multi-band spectral analyzer. So we were looking at 50 different channels of radiation. And we could see when, we had everything right, we would see the fusion radiation signal. And then when it wasn't, you wouldn't see it there. So we pretty much demonstrated that. They probably had problems doing that. But so what they did is they got this thing called a glass bead detector. And it can detect almost single atoms of an element. And so they basically just reproduced our experiment. And so when it wasn't working, you would just see oxygen and deuterium, hydrogen isotope. And then when they turned it on, all of a sudden fluoride would appear. And then turn it off, the fluoride would go away, turn it on. So that confirmed our confirmation of Osawa and Kushi's thing. So Moxy fusion is a real thing. It's actually easily done.
So basically it produces elements.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we did is we were working on a power source, right? Because of Fukushima and Chernobyl, we were working on a cheap power source that people could power, the future of humanity, and we found it with Moxy fusion, because the the highest yield will be deuterium and oxygen. That releases the most energy. And it's actually 1 billion times easier than hydrogen isotope fusion, like all these tokamaks do. We can do it on the laptop for a few $1,000s. That's really what cold fusion is all about. It wasn't cold fusion. It was just Moxy fusion, metal oxygen fusion. And if you go to my paper, I've talked about it in another one where they had the Yordanov and Krilio back in 2004. They were taking tungsten oxide, basically tungsten and water solution, and they were producing gold. Basically, and there's a Dr. Bass was doing it, Ken Shoulders was doing it, Pons and Fleischmann were doing it. They were the cold fusion guys. And that's actually why we were doing the radiation protected, because we actually had besides the multi-channel spectral analyzers, we also had X-ray film and X-ray diffusion plates, because when you do Moxy fusion, it lowers the Coulomb barrier. That is the energy to fuse things. So it also puts out the energy in the X-ray band, not in the Geiger counter band, right? That's Geiger counters are in the gamma ray band, right? Geiger counters can only measure gamma rays, which are much higher energy. And so all of these guys like Fleischmann and Pons and the late Ken Shoulders, the late Dr. Bass, and a lot of other late professors and PhDs, they're walking around with these Geiger counters, which can only detect gamma rays, all the while they're getting themselves massively X-rayed. So, and the other thing that they were doing, if you take like in the Fleischmann Pons case and these other cold fusion cases, cold fusion people, please listen up. What's actually happening is, like, let's say the oxygen is fusing with the platinum metal to make radon, that nasty radioactive substance that releases an alpha particle. And that's in our paper because somebody decided to put some of those, the radon detectors you get for your basement, right? The little chips. They put it in one of those cold fusion cells, and lo and behold, it was totally saturated, because what was happening is, if you had the radon here, I'm just going to put another thing up here. You can kind of see that the radon combines with oxygen to make, the platinum combines with oxygen to make radon. And if you're using palladium, the palladium combines with oxygen to make xenon, another highly radioactive noble gas that vents into the laboratory because it's an electrolytic cell. So this stuff is venting into the laboratory. So now you're breathing like radon, 100 times worse than your worst radon basement, right? And that's why it's the late Fleischmann and the late Dr. Ken Shoulders and there's a lot of other late guys. It wasn't actually, in those cases, it wasn't the government killing them. They basically Madame Curried themselves. Yeah. So if you're going to do this, read the paper, take the precautions. Don't make the same mistakes that they did. And I think that hopefully these guys, that the Scotia group didn't make the same mistake as well, because it does appear it was venting into the laboratory air. They didn't have it under a hood. But anyway, so that's kind of the thing on Moxy fusion. So I had been talking about Moxy fusion and at this talk, and it was over, and a guy comes up and talks to me, and he says, oh, he worked with Stanley Meyer when Stanley Meyer's car was over Unity. Right. And he told me the key thing is, when Stanley Meyer's car was over Unity, they always used heavy water. That's deuterium oxide, which is what we were using, right? Basically using deuterium oxide to break it apart. And that's why I always had fusion. That's why I always had fuel injectors, because in an HHO system, when you boil off the oxygen, that's how you concentrate deuterium. Only 1 out of 7,000 hydrogen atoms is a deuterium atom. It's an isotope of hydrogen. And you basically do electrolysis, and all the hydrogen comes out and the deuterium stays in there. So if you electrolysize 7,000 gallons of water, the last gallon you got is pure heavy water, deuterium oxide. And so that HHO system wouldn't work. So that's why Stanley Meyer made fuel injectors. So the water would go into these fuel injectors with it's kind of like a tube with a wire inside. And then he hit it with a super high voltage, which would convert it into oxygen gas and deuterium, which is a hydrogen isotope. Then they would shoot that into the cylinder. And they also used argon gas. That was when Stanley Meyer wrote his patents, he didn't put everything in. And he got everybody to think it was nitrogen that he was using. What he didn't tell anyone, it was argon gas, which is what we used it's what Osama and Kushi used. It's what we used. It's what the Scotia group used to do Moxy fusion. You always have to have argon. It's like 0.9% of the atmosphere. It's kind of like a moderator that helps drive the Moxy fusion reactor project or process. And so that's the key. And so basically what Stanley Meyer was doing, he was making he turned his dune buggy into a Moxy fusion reactor, a metal oxygen fusion reactor. And that's what he's running because he always, and if you actually go to some of his talks, which are in the link that I sent you, you can actually listen to Stanley Meyer talk about it, and he's giving you the hints of what's going on there. I think he kind of knew what was going on, but he was so secretive that, they killed him. And then they tried to figure it out, and but we didn't do that. We're totally open source. We're giving you the paper. We're telling you how to do Moxy fusion. So we got dozens of people. There's half a dozen countries around the world doing Moxy fusion reactor projects, and there's a bunch of corporations and dozens of individual people are out.
And that's how you don't get killed.
So that's right. You don't have to kill me because it's all open source. Right. Anybody could do it. Lots of people are doing it, not just the Scotia group. So there's no need to go whack my ass. It's out there.
Yeah.
So we did the Stephen Greer method of just release it to everybody, open source it. So, which is why we'd like you to, you can just go there and go to the links and see all this stuff and learn about it. And you can do it yourself too. That's the thing that, actually the cost of inputs and the actual physical cost of inputs and that, like to make gold at the platinum group metals. And I've been on Jay Widener. I talked about one of those recently. It's like less than $100 to do it, folks. That's the input. Now the machine costs much, but the price of that goes down. But the actual inputs in electricity and your inputs of like in the case of making gold, tungsten oxide. But you've got to be careful. Make a little bit of osmium and rhenium. Osmium tetraoxide. It's kind of nasty, so you have to make sure, put the thing under the hood. There's a whole process I've talked about, so you don't get. And it also makes beryllium, which is really interesting because it's this Moxy fusion fission. So there's four different main isotopes of tungsten, right? And some of them, one fuses up into gold, another goes into rhenium, one goes into osmium, but one of them's unstable. So when it fuses, it actually breaks apart. It breaks down. It fissions. And one of the keys, it makes a whole bunch of beryllium. Beryllium is only produced. Beryllium is an element of it's 8. It's got, well, it's usually 9. It's a 4 on the elemental chart, and it's only produced by fission when things break down, like uranium or other radioactive substances. So it showed that there was a fission process, and then the Dr. Bass at the end of my paper was getting he could convert 1/10 of a gram of thorium, which is in the actinides. It's like a cousin of uranium. It's a radioactive substance. He could convert 1/10 of a gram for 300 watts of power. That's like nothing.
Wow.
So he was and converted it into non-radioactive isotopes of copper and tin. But also he did not do his atomics right because it also created a radioactive form of xenon, which he breathed in, and that's why he's the late Dr. Bass. Got to do your atomics right. Otherwise, bad things happen. You need to put that stuff under a hood and vent it away from you. And it makes a lot of X-rays. Now you can do what we do. We were all taking carbon 60. I recommend if you're doing Moxy fusion to take a bunch of carbon 60 and make sure you wear an X-ray dosimeter, which measures your X-ray levels. So you can protect yourself against radiation and stuff. And and when you turn it on, that's why we actually have like 7. We produce 7 working Moxy fusion reactors, and we're giving them away to people for free to like corporations and that are interested in developing it. And certain groups of individuals, we give them away free. But we have a 20-foot turn on thing, so you get 20 feet away from that thing before you turn it on. Because boy, when our little Moxy fusion, it's not very big, right? Just a little tiny fusion candle, but when it turns on, within a minute, it will just totally soak like an X-ray plate.
Well, let's help myself and the audience understand the full implications of this and how it can be applied. You mentioned free energy aspects. It can create elements. How are the different ways that we can apply this in our lives and benefit us?
Well, if you want to do the old alchemy thing, the guy was Yorye and Carrillo were making in 2004. We're using tungsten oxide to produce gold, rhenium, which is also and osmium, and beryllium, all valuable metals. Of course, gold's the most. And so they were doing that in 2004. Of course, if you use the pressurized argon method, use tungsten oxide, use an oxide with the pressurized argon. And if you use like zirconium hafnium oxide you get for China for 50 cents a pound, If you buy it from Sigmund Alds, it's like $20 a pound. But anyway, you can convert that into virtually all the platinum group metals. That's what David Hudson was doing, and the supposed monoatomic gold and stuff. But that'd be another show I could probably do talking about that. But so that's what you can do. But also, what with the Stanley Meyer thing, what people are doing is they got a Stanley Meyer engine, right? And the problem with Stanley Meyer is his dune buggy would stay over unity as long as there was argon in the cylinder, right? When the argon gas ran out, it stopped being over unity. So all really what people done is they've taken, you take an internal combustion engine and you convert it to use the Stanley Meyer fuel injector system. And then you take the exhaust of the Stanley, you attach an electrical generator to that motor, right? So you got electrical generator, you got your Stanley Meyer motor, and then you take the exhaust out of the Stanley Meyer motor and you take it to a condenser where the heavy water, the stuff that hasn't been converted, turns back into a liquid, right? Which you can, because heavy water is pretty expensive. Then you inject it back into the Stanley Meyer motor, and then the argon gas just goes back in to the air intake. And so you close loop that thing. So once you turn it on, it just runs for, well, nearly forever. It does slowly. See, because when you do an oxygen hydrogen, I think it's 9 electron volts. When you do you do an oxygen 16 deuterium fusion, you make around 70,000 volts. That's what we estimate, somewhere around 70,000 volts. That's like, that's a whole lot more than 9 electron volts. And so it was just enough to put more energy out than came in. And so basically they just close loop the Stanley Meyer motor and you fill it full of deuterium heavy water and argon, which aren't very expensive. And then you hook it to an electrical generator, turn it on, and now you've got an electrical generator. You got a fusion reactor running electrical generator. It's happening now. I won't say where, but anyway. And so you can, what it is, it's distributed decentralized power. So you don't need to get it from ExxonMobil. You don't need to get it from, wherever. You can make one of these and have it power your house. And heavy water is found in water. Right? It's one of water. And usually what they do is it's a little expensive, but if when you do electrolysis, if you just take the hydrogen and oxygen that come out, you run it into a fuel cell, you can get 99% of the electrical energy back to break up more water. And so the price of heavy water drops to a fraction of what it is now if you use that process. And so you can basically have decentralized power. Yeah. So anybody anywhere basically on planet Earth, you've got argon. It's 0.9% of the atmosphere. You've got deuterium. It's in every gallon of water, just a little bit, especially it's a higher in seawater. That's why Stanley Meyer always said, get your water from seawater, because seawater has about twice as much heavy water in it, deuterium, as does rainwater. Because even the chemical thing of water evaporating, deuterium tends to stay behind in the ocean where it comes out. So just use water from the ocean for making your heavy water, and there it is. And then also you can make your own heavy metals, at least your precious metals. The platinum, the gold with tungsten oxide, the platinum group metals with zirconium oxide, and there's a whole bunch of others, right? Right now there's about, 70 metals that are used by humans, if you can consider it all. Well, with Moxy fusion, but a lot of Moxy fusion, when you do a Moxy fusion process, it'll produce a monoisotopic metal. That is, that the metal will be only, most metals have like different isotopes. That means they have the same number of protons, but different numbers of neutrons. And so each one of those is like a separate metal. And if it's really hard to separate it, like in uranium, they use uranium-235 in the atomic reactors, where uranium-238 is worthless, and they have to separate that. But with Moxy fusion, you can make a lot of that. So copper, that like gold, is the only monoisotopic metal out there. And that's why it's really great in quantum devices. So if you're going to build a quantum basic device, you want to make sure that every element in your quantum device is monoisotopic, because that would create stability in the generation of quantum fields. So that's why gold's so valuable in that sense, and they use it in quantum circuits, because gold is always atomic weight of 179, and there's no isotopes really in gold. But you can do the same with that. So instead of having like 70-something metals, we can now, because each metal usually has 3 or 4 isotopes, you can now have 200 or 300 metals, and each one because you could take the copper, this certain type of copper will work a certain way in a circuit where different type of isotope of copper would work differently. And so it opens up a potential industrial revolution in metals when the actual use of these metals is developed. Right now, we don't actually have that technology. Well, now we do, but in that small sense. But if it was developed into the main sense, so but and there's lots of people right now. I'm just saying, if gold's what $2,500 an ounce, and if you were making it for a few $100s in your garage or workshop, there's a little bit of let us say that some people are starting to supplement their incomes.
Earlier, you mentioned the monoatomic gold. Talk a little bit more about this and what is special about this.
Yeah, David Hudson. David Hudson decided he was going to get gold out of basalt rock by cyanide leaching it. But all we really got was zirconium and hafnium oxide, right? And then he put it in this old Soviet spectral analyzer. This is a really short thing. And guess what the Soviet spectral analyzer really, what it is, it runs a flow of argon, right? That argon gas again. And there's what spectral analyzer just tells you what the elements are there. And what you do is you put your little element sample, which in his case it was zirconium hafnium oxide, in this little carbon graphite cup. Graphite, by the way, is electrically conductive. You slide it into the spectral analyzer. They close the hatch there, and then they flush the whole thing with argon gas. Then you run it about 10 to 15 seconds, and the electric spark will vaporize some of that sample that you have in the little graphite cup, and then the argon gas blows it along where usually lasers or synchronistic light will hit it, and then the elements will absorb some of the spectra, and then that makes a spectroscope, and then you look at that. There's usually take a picture of it, and you look at that, and it'll tell you what elements are in that sample. Well, David Hudson had heard, well, if you run it 300 seconds, then you start seeing, like, sometimes, occasionally, especially the platinum group metals would appear, like palladium, platinum, iridium, rhodium, ruthenium, osmium. Those kind of metals would appear, and so he basically turned it on, and after about 300 seconds of running, it's electrical spark in a metal oxide in an argon atmosphere. It turns the Soviet spectral analyzer into a Moxy fusion reactor, and after a while, the zirconium would fuse into rhodium. A little bit of it would turn into rhodium, rhenium, and a little bit of palladium. No, rhodium, ruthenium, and a little bit of palladium, and then about 4% of that zirconium hafnium oxide zirconium oxide is hafnium oxide, same atomic family. And it would turn into platinum, iridium, and rhenium. And then he would see that in the spectral analyzer. And he was thinking that that stuff was there all the time, and it was in this monoatomic state, or a monoatomic gold state, right? That's where it's actually there, but it can't be detected by spectral analyzers unless you do with all this other stuff. What he actually was doing, he was fusing, zirconium has several isotopes, right? So it makes different platinum group metals, and hafnium has several isotopes, makes a bunch of. So he was actually creating those metals. He was creating gold. He was creating platinum and palladium and rhenium and rhodium and iridium. But he thought it was there in this strange monoatomic state, and then he was just making it visible to the eyes. But in reality, he couldn't understand. And that's really kind of ironic because, like the hot fusion guys really crunched on the cold fusion guys. You remember that, how they got suppressed in the 80s and stuff? And like the cold fusion guys don't like Moxy fusion either because it blows up their little things. So the cold fusion guys treat Moxy fusion like the hot fusion guys treated them. Though a few of them are coming around these days. So it's kind of amusing. But the thing about Moxy fusion, anybody can do it. And it's easy to do, and it's repeatable. We did it. The Scotia group did it. Lots of other people are doing it. You can do it in your garage, or your workshop. This is doable. You don't need me. The basic thing is this. This is how Osawa and Kushi did it, and how some people that we know are doing it. Basically, you get an old sodium street lamp, power supply. They're all over the place because they're replacing them with LEDs. you put a bridge diode on the front of it, so now it comes out DC pulses. So now you got one wire is going to be anode, one's going to be a cathode. And then you get yourself a little graphite container. You stuff your zirconium hafnium oxide or your tungsten oxide or whatever oxide you want to do. You pressurize it. Ooh, military's flying over right now. I guess I'm upsetting them. And then you pressurize it in an argon atmosphere with some chamber, and you just zap the hell out of it. And a certain percentage of that is going to turn into your gold. And then because there's things like osmium tetraoxide, it's kind of toxic. I would just dump the whole thing into sulfuric acid, pool acid, right? For your muriatic acid you buy at the pool supply store. All of the ruthenium and osmium is going to dissolve in that. It's going to leave your platinum, palladium, iridium, and rhenium behind, and then you can just kind of separate it out with a front. What do you call those? Gold mining pan, right? Because the zirconium oxide is pretty light, and so it's just an oxide. You can just get your little platinum group metals out. They'll go at the bottom, just like gold does, and you just get rid of the sand and reuse that. Well, it's basically looks like sand. Reuse your zirconium hafnium oxide, and just kind of wash it a couple times with water, and then you get your little platinum group metals at the bottom of your gold pan, and put that aside. Put it in a piece of bone china. It's like a little crucible, and just hit it with the blowtorch, and it'll all melt down into a little bead that's made of all those platinum group metals or gold and some platinum group metals, and then you just sell it on to the guy that refines it.
I know you said that by kind of open sourcing this, it's allowing you not to have to worry about being suicided, but this information and these discoveries seem like they're such a threat to the ruling class that it seems like there would be more interest from these dark groups in what you're doing.
Well, maybe someday, but you see, they can't grasp, their heads can't grasp around it, right? It's simply impossible. Alchemy is impossible, especially alchemy that you can do on your own in your own garage, right? You don't need a $1 billion machine to do this stuff. You can do it yourself. It's easy to do. And so they just can't, their minds just can't wrap around it. The concept that could be real is just, it's like you can't believe your lying eyes, right? Just like the UFO thing. Oh, all these people see it, but they can't really accept what they're seeing. Well, it's one of those things of human nature.
It seems like a good thing is it's allowing it to get out there and permeate the collective consciousness a little bit.
Oh, it's out there, and there's nothing they can do about it now. There are some nations who picked up on this and are doing stuff about it, right? Some smaller, they're all pretty much all in Asia. Let us say that. And then there's some corporation types that are doing it, or groups of individuals that are doing it. I mean, we have these Moxy fusion reactors we give away. That they're just a proof of concept, right? They're just doing the deuterium oxygen thing, and you can see that it's actually happening. You can do the measurements, whether you glass bead detector to see the appearance of fluoride or seeing the spectral analyzer. It's up to you to what you want to do with that. We just give those away to groups, and because it only costs us a few $1,000s to make one, so we just do it and give it away, and then they use it and get results, and it just kind of spreads from there. But you don't need me. You don't, just download the papers that I talked about and do it yourself. And that's the whole point. This is decentralized power. You can decentralize power. You can make your own Moxy fusion electrical generator at your house, right? And then you could, even with a fuel cell, get a fuel cell. And one of the biggest problems with fuel cells is they're really expensive because they use platinum group metals in them, right? So now you can make your platinum group metals for under $100 an ounce. So now that fuel cell isn't very expensive. So this is something that can be done anywhere, any place on the planet, and decentralized power. You don't need ExxonMobil and all these oil people to give you the electricity, or natural gas, or the fission power plants, which melt down and spew all kinds of radioactivity. A Moxy fusion plant, when you turn that sucker off, everything stops right there. Boom, done. There's no residual radioactivity. Well, maybe a little of the noble gases. They last only a couple hours, and then they turn into non-radioactive substances. So it's essentially, it'll never melt down, right?
Right.
And you can go. I mean, just imagine, you can have a gold mine in your garage.
Yeah.
You don't need. It's a lot easier and cheaper than getting it out of the stream. So, and people are doing the platinum group metals, right? And or all those other rare earth metals. That's one of the things. Thulium uh, is being made by the tungsten oxide. That's one of the. If you go to, I think it's page 30, and you can see where their rare earth metal is being made. And so there's probably and it's a really unexplored territory. There's all these different metal oxides that you can fuse and make a whole variety of. I don't know what the daughter products are. I know of what other people did. I know what we did. I know what other people have done just in this paper. I told a little bit about the Stanley Meyer, a little about the David Hudson stuff, but there's like all this unexplored science research that nobody's really touched on. You could probably make a lot of there are some rare earth elements that if you could make, because usually rare earth elements, they all come together and it's really super hard to separate them. You have to use these diffusion columns. It's like this hassle, but like with the thulium that was made by you're making one rare earth element, so you don't do have to go through all that thing. And like the Chinese cut the Americans off of gadolinium and germanium, right? All you got to do is go out and get some manganese oxide, which is one of the most common minerals in the earth, and do that manganese Moxy fusion, that manganese oxide. You'll get all the gadolinium and germanium you want. You don't need to buy it from China. You can just make it yourself from one of the most common elements. Manganese oxide is everywhere. Right?
These are definitely exciting possibilities for the future of humanity. Now, for the last few minutes we have, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that it is the 9/11 anniversary, which was one of the stepping stones to global domination from our ruling class right now. But looking back at the events of 2020, I often wonder these days if we aren't in a better place now collectively, just being aware of the corruption, just being aware of a lot of things that we had no idea about before that. At least a lot of the collective had no idea to the level of corruption that we are subjected to. But it's coming out bit by bit, and today we're discussing these exciting possibilities for free energy and making elements out of nowhere. So we have these exciting possibilities for the future, and we're at a critical time right now. The most ridiculous theatrical election season I've ever seen. What could unfold after this? Who knows? But I think it is a pivotal point in where we're at, and I'd love to get your thoughts on everything unfolding.
Well, we have learned some things since 9/11. For instance, before 9/11, no steel frame building had ever collapsed due to fire. And whereas 3 did that day, one wasn't even hit by an airplane, and they all fell down in free fall speed. And since then, there still hasn't been a steel frame building falling down completely due to fire, right? So that's in free fall speed, right? So, wow, well, how amazing is that? One time in history, 3 buildings fell down in free fall speed due to fire. Never before and never since. What an amazing thing! It's like that. It's kind of like reminds me of that facility that Epstein stayed at. It was running for like 10 years. And nobody had ever died of suicide in there because, they kind of prevented that. And then after Epstein was in it, nobody had ever died of suicide afterwards. Wow, how amazing is that? Just that one time events. Epstein died of suicide, was able to suicide. It's never happened before or never happened since. Isn't that an amazing coincidence? Oh, the coincidence. I mean, it's so obvious now. And so many of these things are so obvious now. That it was an inside job this way, that way, and the other side, and all the other inside jobs that have been coming out and getting suppressed. Like, look at what happened to Alex Jones. And if we won't say too much more on that, but if you were to really examine the incident that got the suit against Alex Jones, you might not believe what the mainstream media says.
Yeah.
Just saying, but don't let me tell you. I mean, that's the thing. Don't believe anything I say or Chris says. Go out and check it out for yourself and confirm for yourself. You are the third party evidence. You are the third party decider. right? It's reality is understandable by just the average person if you just have an open mind and an honest heart, I guess.
Well, they want us to only believe the quote unquote experts and the algorithms to provide all of our daddy government approved information. We are not supposed to think for ourselves. That's the last thing we're supposed to be doing. But amazingly, like I said, I think there's a lot more of us thinking for ourselves these days, and there's a lot of positive things that came out of the events of the past few years, but we are in a state of collective insanity, you could say, right now. What are your thoughts about what's unfolding right now with the election?
Well, there's all the people are, well, yeah, it's state of insanity. I mean, it's just retardedly ridiculous. Okay. And I'm not politically correct, so I can say that word. And it's got to the point of, well, look at like the whole, it doesn't matter which you can do the camel, you can do the Donald, or you can do the junior, and what country they all support.
Right,
what's going on in Gaza, right? There's no difference there. Hell no, it's and what are they threatening to have war with Lebanon here in the next 72 hours or something? Of course, they made that threat a lot of times before, so maybe it's not true, but still, I mean, if that tops off, it's just like it has become like a circus. Yes, a circus. Yeah, the asylums the inmates are definitely running the asylums, because America's turned into just one lunatic thing of just the most ridiculous things, the most ridiculous explanations they want us to believe. And if we don't believe it, we're bad people. We're haters and racists and anti-Semites and every other bad thing under the sun, because if you don't believe what I'm telling you, you're a bad person.
Well, I think information is the way out. The more people come to understand that both sides are controlled by the same evil force, the more that we have a chance to check out of this system and maybe start utilizing some of the things that we were talking about earlier to start our own societies and our own systems and rebuild everything. I mean, that's a great foundation to start with, just by knowing that we have the capability to do these things on our own.
That's right. If you have decentralized energy that anybody anywhere can make all the electrical energy they need and other forms of energy, and if they can synthesize all those precious metals that they need for technology, we don't really need a whole lot of that, and and you can actually probably with that energy you can grow healthy food that isn't full of toxic chemicals and pesticides, and it gives people a chance to break free of I don't know, should I say it, the Matrix?
I don't know how to move forward from the system that we're in right now, especially the political control system, where we're presented two sides of an extremity that's really the same thing once you reach the extremes of each side. And when you question either side, you become the enemy at this point. Free thinkers, people who are on the right side of history, people who aren't participating in an insanity, are more and more becoming enemy of the state as we speak. So there seems like there has to be a tipping point where the system no longer works for the majority of people for us to collectively reject it, but I don't know.
Well, I think it's go local. It's, that's where it's going to be. It's going to happen local, in your local community with your friends and allies and people working together to make it happen. That's where that's where your strength is. And especially, we haven't talked, if people really have studied economics, we are standing on the precipice of another Great Depression, whether we like it or not. I mean, look, what is the debt is like 36 trillion, whereas if you look at Catherine Austin Fitts, it's probably 136 trillion.
Yeah.
It's probably down to like they have to print or create out of thin air electronically over $1 trillion less than 100 days in every 100 days. It's probably 80 days now. And that's just the stuff that's on the books. I mean, I don't even
pay attention to politics, but if I ever check in briefly or pay attention to what others are saying, it doesn't seem like either of these candidates even mention the extraordinary inflation or state of our economy or the real problems at all that we're facing.
Oh, yeah. It's like the lies they tell you. I mean, they telling you, oh, inflation is only 2% or 3%. Well, go down to the damn grocery store and look at the prices compared to the last time you've been there, or the prices they were, a couple of years ago. Yeah, tell me that's what the inflation rate is. Yeah, I see that every day when I go to the grocery store. It's well, I won't say that word I was going to say, but anyway, yeah, it's BS, and they're just lying to you. And if you look at the exponential growth of debt and then the interest rate you have to pay on that debt, soon all the taxes collected will not even be able to pay off the interest on the national debt, let alone paying off the debt itself, just the interest. And so you're in that, you're going to have to go into that hyperinflationary spiral, which is what almost every time they do. There's very few cases where they'll bite that. What they're going to do is they're just going to have to, they usually hyperinflate, the currency out until it collapses. And so, I mean, people need to think about, making sure that they have, a solid friends and family, a support group where they're at, and food and a water source, and, little things that, can protect that food and water source, and people to work with. Because that's really how, like when the Soviet Union collapsed, that's how people had community. And it was the communities, local communities of people, family and friends working together that got them all through with that. And that's what's going to do in the future. It's family and friends and your local community working together that's going to make this happen, because people have different skills. They can trade skills for other skills and for food and all that. And a really good thing is to hook up with like a local farmer. If you know one of those local farmers that does a subscription model, and there's lots of the Amish and Mennonites out there, it'd be really good to know your local Amish or Mennonite farmer, or your other, organic farmer out there that you can, so you have a food source on your own. 100%. Buy a share in a cow, so you've got that nice, raw, healthy milk instead of that pasteurized garbage.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. I mean, it's time to start building local communities and local infrastructure, local structures to support you in what's coming up. That's how it's going to get through you. Relying on some dude out there that's going to tell you, oh, when you elect me, I'm going to make all this happen. Well, look, the country's been running for the last 4 years, obviously, with the brain dead zombie. He doesn't, they have to change his diapers, and, he probably still likes cherry ice cream or something. But other than that, we haven't had a leader, right? Obviously on either side. And Kamala, she's just out there just cackling and doing nothing. But the system kept moving on. And somehow if they put a new, it's kind of reminds me of, it's like if you got a car, right? And if you change the hood ornament, you change the type of car, right? Oh, I'll just put a Mercedes hood ornament. Now it's a Mercedes. Oh, nope, I'll put a Rolls Royce ornament on it. No, now it's a Rolls Royce. No, it's really just an old Ford beater. Sorry. And no matter what sort of hood ornament you put on it, it doesn't really change what it really is. And I think a lot of that stuff is, I mean, there's that unelected government, the deep state, the whatever. There's all kinds, and really, even the government doesn't run things. It's the central banks which run everything. They could create money out of thin air, and they can create as much money out of thin air as they want to buy anybody and anything. There used to be Ken O'Keefe around, but he kind of disappeared. But anyway, he would talk about this kind of stuff, because that's what it is. It's they created. If I controlled the money supply and could create as much infinite money out of thin air that I wanted to, I would be able to control. I could buy everybody and everything that I wanted to, and until the creation of money is taken out of hands of a few banksters, you're just going to have, the problem is going to continue. Changing, the hood ornament isn't going to change the problem, because they're not in charge. It's the banksters who are in charge. The people that create the money out of thin air, create the credit out of thin air. They're the ones that, call the shots. And when those people get changed out, then you'll see real change.
It's time for us to start taking some accountability. And with the information we shared today, that's a great way to start. develop the understanding of this Moxy fusion technology and take back our planet. Ken, thank you so much for this information. We'll definitely be doing it again. Before we close out, once again, remind the audience where they can find that YouTube channel and find out more about this.
Okay, well, you can just go to, well, first off, the website is shopc60.com, yes. And your coupon code is?
It is FKN10.
Yeah, so if you go to the website, make sure to use that coupon code because Chris will get a little benefit too. And also we have actually the YouTube channel is C60 PurplePower, and we also have Jess, our CEO, interviews a whole bunch of doctors about a whole bunch of different health problems. So you can actually listen to doctors about certain health problems. These are real medical doctors, and you can hear about how C60 helps because really just C60 is just like a base. If you got good mitochondria, then you're going to have healthy cells, but it's not going to replace a good diet. It's not going to replace exercise. It's not going to replace proper supplementation. It's not going to replace good sleep. All of those things. Those are really, I mean, if you want good health, you're going to have to work on it. C60 is just one tool in the toolkit for good health, but in reality, you got to do the whole thing, and otherwise, and that's really what, and also, I mean, and make your own decisions. You got to take care of your health. That's the most important thing you have. And you're the one responsible for that. No secret pill, no magic, anything's going to do that. It just takes a lot of work. And that's really what we just have to take back responsibility and control of our lives in every way that we can, because as the days go by and things change, we're going to need more and more and more of that, and work with family and friends, right? Build that community around yourself. That's the most important thing, I think, of all. Because to have people to work with and to that social support, that's really important for good health as well.
100%. Ken, thank you so much. We'll definitely be doing this again soon. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.